All right, perfect. So if there's not any other questions or concerns, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're here for about an hour, so I will introduce myself, kind of my background, my experience, and then I'll go through the teaching on healthy habits today. That's our topic for today's webinar. And then I will reserve the last little bit of time for any questions, answers, that kind of thing. And then throughout the course, if there's other people that join in, I'll go ahead and add them as well. My name is Dr. Erica Steele. I prefer Dr. Steele. I've been in the holistic health lifestyle for a long time, my entire life. In fact, I was raised very holistically, very natural minded. I was raised a vegetarian. I'm a Native American, so I was raised doing a lot of Native American spiritual work. And so having a holistic lifestyle really has been just how I live my life and how I've lived my life the entire time. I've been professionally now in 20 years. This slide is old, but I've been in natural healthcare for 20 years, and I have 6 degrees in my field. They're all in the natural healthcare space. And I have lots and lots of certifications, and they're all specific to holistic healthcare and holistic medicine. So to kind of break down my education, I have an AS in psychology. I have a bachelor's in alternative medicine. I have a bachelor's in natural healthcare sciences, a doctorate in natural medicine, a doctorate in naturopathy. I have a master's in public health with a concentration in complementary alternative medicine, and I'm certified in clinical hypnotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, neurolinguistic programming as well. So all various modalities also around human behavior and helping people to achieve natural health. I'm also trained in biochemistry as well. So clinical biochemistry, so laboratory diagnostics is an area of specialty that I have as well. And I have a practice in a brick and mortar practice in Virginia Beach, and I treat patients internationally. So our topic today is all about habits. Hi. So we want to talk about what it takes to change a habit. And so some things to consider are that changing habits can be easy. I also want to help you kind of to understand the distinction. Building a new habit is always easier, than breaking an old one. So, building a new habit would be something like drinking more water. Breaking an old habit would be something like quitting smoking, right? So, but habits are built consistently, deliberately over an extended period of time. And so, I'm going to briefly show you guys how to build a habit, but understand that habits can build up to create lifestyles. So we talk about beliefs, right? And we'll talk a little bit about beliefs when we talk about your subconscious mind, your conscious mind. But you have beliefs, and then you have thoughts about those beliefs, and then emotions tied to those thoughts, and then actions based off of the emotions. And then eventually those actions become behaviors, those behaviors become habits, and those habits become lifestyles. So it's important to understand when you're trying to change your lifestyle, you have to look at your habits, but then also it's deeper than that. You really want to look at the mental and emotional and also the belief system of the individual in order to shift the habit. We'll talk about stages of change, so you understand what that looks like. We'll talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind and the roles that those play in changing habits. We'll talk briefly about payoffs and costs. We'll talk about structuring a habit, and I'll give you some examples. And then we'll go over some areas of life that we can have habits in, that we can create some healthier habits, and we'll talk about those. First things first, though, is why would we want to change? Sometimes that can be obvious, but sometimes not so much. So some of the reasons why we want to change our habits or, change our lifestyle is that we may feel like we're missing something. We want a more fulfilled life. We're trying to reach a specific goal, physical illness, mental illness, emotional well-being, feeling spiritually disconnected. Perhaps our relationships are not where that we want them to be, either interpersonal relationships like with a partner and or relationships with friends, etc., or even family members. So sometimes we may need to change a habit to be able to help build healthier relationships in our home life. So that's our environment. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of like, all of the various tasks that are involved in managing and running a home. And then we'll also look at a little bit about work as well. And so if your work life is not where you want it to be, i.e. if you don't necessarily enjoy what you do for a living, or if you're at a different stage in your life and you want to redefine that particular area. Let's say you're going into retirement, or you're leaving one career to another, or perhaps you're leaving more of a structured career setting to maybe self-employment. There's some different things that are involved in those different stages. So the stages of change, this is the change model. So we talk about behavior, right? So there's denial, which denial is where we just don't know anything. We don't see a problem. We don't see that anything needs to change. Everything's fine, right? And I'm sure we've been there ourselves, or we know other people. Then we go into pre-contemplation, where we're starting to realize that maybe things do need to shift in our lives. We don't really know what needs to shift, but we're start to be aware that, this doesn't quite feel like I want it to feel, or things aren't going the way that I want them to go, etc. Then that moves into contemplation, where we really start to see, okay, some things really need to change, and here's why. I have some reasoning. And so then in preparation, you start to actively look for a solution, and you look for a plan to be able to make a shift in your life. And then action is where you implement a plan, and then you execute, and you're continuing to do it every single day. And then maintenancing is it really just becomes part of your everyday life, and it's easy and it's just expected, right? And then there can be relapses involved with that too. You can also maybe be in a pre-contemplative state and move to a contemplative, and then go back to a pre-contemplative state. So you can really move alongside these aspects of change pretty fluid. So it's important to realize where a person is. This really comes in handy to realize when you're speaking to other people, okay? Because I know a lot of people, they want to help their friends, their family members, etc. Because we can all see really where each other, is missing or deficient. And so sometimes we're like, people will come into my practice, they're like, well, I'm frustrated. My significant other, they know that they need to eat better, but they're not, right? Well, if we apply these stages of change model, we're looking at it, if they're not even aware that they need to change, and or they have a plan to change, then you continuing to tell them again and again and again what they need to do is really it's like, you're talking to a brick wall. So I counsel people to really to not necessarily do that, but really focus on themselves and really model that behavior that they want to see with other people, until eventually a person comes to them and starts asking them questions and wants to do it. So we can't change other people. We can only really focus on ourselves. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're really going to focus mainly on ourselves, not focusing on other people in our lives. And so we're going to kind of continue to build upon that concept. So we have The first 12% is our conscious mind, right? That houses our logic, our voice, our reason, our decision making. A lot of our thoughts and our ideas come out of the conscious mind. This is also where our willpower sits and our short-term memory. It's our decision making process, so we can make quick decisions, at the drop of a hat, right? Most of our actions do not come out of the conscious mind, believe it or not. They're coming out of the subconscious. The subconscious is about 88%. It does house part of our primitive mind, which is more, some people call it our monkey mind. That's where our fear center is. Love or fear are two major motivations, but also too, it houses our belief systems, our values, our habits, our thoughts about life, our intuition, our creativity, all of those things are part of it. Subconscious develops from 0 to 8 years old. Our conscious mind develops from around, some would say 11, 12 to about 14 years old. And so everything new coming in is going through a filter of our conscious mind directly to our subconscious mind. So that's why sometimes it can be challenging. Let's say if you come from a family, I'm going to use it in the context of eating and health, right? So let's say if you come from a family that didn't value eating healthy, right? They didn't value sitting around the table, preparing dinner every night. Maybe they ordered pizza every night, or, fast food and quick, right? It's very difficult. That's your belief system. Your belief system that was developed between 0 to 8 is of this mindset that, food needs to be quick, fast, in a hurry. There's really no point in preparing food. It doesn't make sense to sit around the table, etc. That way, when you grow up, you hold on to those same values and those same belief systems and those same habits until eventually you continue to eat like that. Eventually you start to get sick, and then your health needs to be looked at, right? And so then going, let's say, to a doctor like myself, part of what we do is we help shift those values, we shift those belief systems, right? So I had a patient years ago who her family, and it doesn't always work where, you're taught the unhealthy way. Sometimes it's taught the opposite, right? So as an example, I had a patient came in, and she was a personal trainer, and she had diabetes, and she's very young, in her 20s. She had diabetes, she had high cholesterol, hypertension. And as we started to explore, the reason is because she ate a lot of fast food, right? Well, the reason that she ate a lot of fast food is because her family were farmers. And so they would grow all their own food, and they would make her sit at the table until she finished eating, right? And so she would sit at the table for long hours of time, and even sometimes fall asleep at the table because she just wouldn't eat her vegetables. And so she made a decision really young to say, you know what, when I get out of this house, I'm going to eat whatever I want. And so when she got out of the house, she sure did. She ate whatever she wanted. And eventually her body and her health started to suffer. So it's not always like the positive reinforcement. A lot of times it's the negative reinforcement as well, until we resolve and we reconcile these things in our mind. And so it's even though it's easy to shift a habit, sometimes some of the underlying roots of root causes as to why those habits are in place are not always easy to see. And so that's why we kind of look at the iceberg, because consciously you can make a decision to do something, and you can will yourself into doing it. But eventually those emotions, those thoughts, those core belief systems that were created long before, sometimes those will create resistance and then sabotage you from achieving your goal. And that's especially true if you continue to see that you have breakdowns when you're trying to accomplish something new. So we'll address that a little bit, but it's important to understand the seen versus the unseen when you're trying to shift a habit. The subconscious does get a payoff from keeping the habit in place. So there's this balance. There's a payoff and there's a cost, right? So sometimes the payoff can be really obvious. Like in the example I gave you about my patient, it's like the payoff she's getting is to be right? The payoff she's getting is she can be free, she can do what she wants. And so, however, the cost is to her own health and her own detriment. Really, health is about a balance, right? Even when I was a cyclist, so I was a pretty extreme athlete for a long time with cycling and eating, and I went to the total extreme, and extreme healthy wasn't necessarily healthy, right? So much to the point that one of my New Year's resolutions, this was long, many, many years ago, was to eat meat. I was a raw food vegan at the time. And the reason that I put that was because I had gone so extreme in my healthy because I needed to be good. I come from, both my parents are Marines. So, we were really conditioned to be a certain way, right? To be perfect. My dad's a Virgo, so I love him to death, but like, totally invented perfectionism. And so I lived into that experience and constantly trying to make myself even better, even better, even better. Well, when you apply that to, working out or eating healthy, the boxes get smaller, and unfortunately you start to wear your body down. So I had to really make a shift because the cost in my health wasn't worth the payoff that I was getting from being good or being a good girl or doing the right thing, etc. So it's important to see that the payoff and the cost are going to counterbalance each other. And if the cost, right, does not outweigh the payoff that a person is getting, they're not going to want to change, right? And so sometimes we hold on to all sorts of payoffs, like being safe, for instance. Sometimes people don't communicate authentically how they feel in relationships or set healthy boundaries because they're afraid of the reactions of other people. So in that case, the payoff is to be safe. Sometimes also the payoff can be a victimization, like invalidating ourselves. Sometimes we I'm in a dating experience right now. I call it an experience because it's an experience and it's interesting. And so, if I don't respond or communicate as the person would want me to, they immediately invalidate themselves and like, oh, you must not like me. And it's like, wait a second, I was away from my phone for 2 hours, calm down. So sometimes, the payoffs can be obvious and sometimes the payoffs cannot be obvious. So that's also the advantage of working with somebody to help you understand, but also too, writing and journaling actually accesses the subconscious mind. So anything that you are stuck around and you need to understand the payoffs that you're getting from it, if you start to journal about why, this particular thing is in place, let's say you're not eating healthy or, you're not achieving the goal that you're trying to accomplish, journaling around that to really understand what those payoffs can be so that you know where you need to shift, what new habits need to be created. So when we're consciously structuring a habit, right? So it's important, like I said, to journal and discuss and understand. And you can do this through meditation as well, where you're really being present to understand the insights as what's keeping you stuck, right? So it's important to do that work first. Otherwise, you are going to keep having sabotages in different situations, right? But let's say that's no longer an issue and all that's clear. And now you're just consciously structuring a habit, right? So you want to start with the end result in mind. So let's say the end result is losing weight. Let's say you want to lose 20 pounds, right? You want to break down what it takes to lose weight into palatable steps. So you need to drink, a gallon of water a day. You need to have 100 grams of protein every single day. You need to keep your fat down to 30 grams a day. Those are just some of the steps that it would take, right? And you want to begin to work on little baby steps, right? So for me, I have to practice drinking water. It's not something that is a habit as of yet. So I'll do it for a little bit and then I'll fall off. And then I'll do it for a little bit and then I'll fall off, right? Especially in the wintertime. In the summertime, it's a little bit easier, but in the wintertime, I really have to focus on, the getting enough water, right? And that's all a part of building my health, right? So I've set in my mind, I go, okay, I want to drink a gallon of water a day. So I'm going going to break that up. I'm going to do 32 ounces of water 4 times a day, right? And that's going to get my gallon. So when I wake up, I'm going to drink 32. In between my breakfast and my lunch, I'm going to do 32. In between my lunch and my dinner, 32. And then after dinner, I'm going to do my 32. So I have a plan in place, and then I can begin to execute that plan, right? But let's say I wake up and I fail, right? Let's say I wake up and I wake up late and oh my gosh, I have to rush out the door, and I wasn't able to drink that 32 ounces of water a day, right? I'm going to observe what created the failure, right? So I woke up late, right? So then I examine, not from space of judgment. It's important not to judge yourself in this, but look and go, okay, so did I stay up too late? Was I watching a television show too late? Did I set my alarm? Did I not set my alarm? What are the things that I need to put in place so that next time, I'll be successful, right? So this is especially true with healthy eating because it's not an instant gratification. So many times when people want to shift their lifestyle of healthy eating, the first thing they do is go and try to take out all the unhealthy foods they think. And that's the absolute worst way to structure a new habit, because remember, we talked about it. Breaking a habit is much more difficult than building a new one. So you want to start by building. If you're going to be changing your lifestyle in terms of your eating, you want to add healthy things in. So you want to add more fruits and vegetables. You want to add more water. You want to add more protein. And then eventually your body will naturally stop wanting the unhealthy foods, number one. And number two, it'll be a lot easier for you to let those foods go because now you're eating predominantly healthier foods. So it's many of us were taught using classical conditioning, which is, you're a good girl, you're a bad girl, you're a good boy, you're a bad boy. And you weren't often given structure unless you did something wrong, right? You weren't told, okay, this is how you do it step by step by step. You were just told, oh no, you didn't do it right. And so many of us still have that same thought process when we are trying to learn and implement something new. So it's really important for us to break free from that and work on this process, because it's proven. I've used it many, many times in my practice, and it works. And it works naturally. And that's what I love. You're not having to deal with so much resistance. You're not having to deal with, the conscious mind, which is the ego kind of telling you all the crazy things. No, don't do that. You can't do this, da, da, da. And you're not having to fight against all of that. Instead, you're just able to observe and slowly add things in, and making it an easier process for not only your conscious mind, but your subconscious mind to receive that information. So as you start slowly and you work up, it's easier for the mind to kind of take that in. And if you observe rather than judge, then you're able to really pull up whatever has been blocking you and whatever has been stopping you from achieving the goal that you want to achieve. I'll give you an example. So, I have a very structured diet, right? However, being single, I don't enjoy cooking. It's not something that I enjoy cooking for other people, but cooking for myself can sometimes be a little boring. And so I went through a lot of different challenges trying, or really exercises, if you will, because they weren't really challenges, observing how it was going to work for me. So I started off traditionally where, I'd go on Sunday and I'd grocery shop and I would prep all the food and make all the food for the week, right? Well, by Wednesday, two things happened. One, I was exhausted on Sunday and didn't really want to spend my entire Sunday prepping and cooking food. And two, by Wednesday, I didn't like the way the food tasted, or I didn't want the food that I prepared. So I was throwing it all out and ordering food anyway, right? And so I learned, okay, so now let me do it a different way, right? So then I started to make only a couple days worth of food. And then it was like, okay, well, I can do that. But then, what if I make, my proteins on one day and then my veggies on another day, and I make my starch all at once, right? And so I started to implement. And so I broke it down into micro habits. So now it literally just fits into my life. And then not obviously, but I also found different appliances that I could use that could help me, like a Ninja or a steamer, or now I have a sous vide, which defrost and roast and all the things that I need within 25 minutes. It's like a little kitchen robot thing. But I built up to all of those different nuances, really by observing what worked best for me, rather than, if I failed, I wouldn't necessarily beat myself up and, oh my gosh, how could you not do this? And how could you not do that? Da, da, da. I didn't get into those conversations. Instead, I observed what was missing, the presence of which would make a difference, right? And as I began to observe that, I began to have a lot more patience with myself and understanding, and now utilizing that information to be able to teach and help other people. So it does definitely pay off in the end. In a holistic health model, these are the areas of life that we look at. We look at physical health. We look at, and we'll break down what these are. We look at environmental health. We look at mental health. We look at emotional health. We look at spiritual health, and we look at ancestral health. That ancestral being what has been passed down through the DNA, and also what's been passed down behaviorally, because families pass down different habits, and then what we are passing down to our children and other generations ahead of us. So that's why we include that piece of it in there, because we really want to break some of these unhealthy habits so that we don't continue to bring them forward. So these are all the areas that we really focus on in holistic healthcare. And that's why it's holistic. So your traditional allopathic doctor typically is going to look at your physical and maybe your mental health. They're not necessarily going to look at all of these different areas of your life, because they all have balances, they all relate, and timing and all the things. So we're going to kind of dig deeper into these different areas of your life. So physical habits, right? So some of the things you can implement and take away from this webinar are like drinking water, eating healthy. Now, I made it as a general eating healthy, because eating healthy is a big conversation. It's a big topic. We do have a healthy healthy eating online course that's coming up, if anyone's interested in that. And so we kind of teach around all of the nuts and bolts around eating. Exercise is a physical habit, stretching is another physical habit, and then of course sleeping. So those are our main pillars of our physical health and well-being: moving our bodies, rest, eating, nourishing our bodies, drinking water. Detoxification is also a part of that. As well, we want to have proper organ health and hygiene. We probably should detox about twice a year. And I tend to detox one organ at a time, starting with the liver and then the digestive system. And then different organs take different periods of time. This isn't a detox class, but I thought I would throw that out there to you guys as well. Environmental habits. So these can be like your relationships, either with your spouse or significant other, or your friends, or even your family. And so that gets into boundaries, right? So having healthy boundaries for yourself, as well as having healthy boundaries for other people. Communication, right? Communication is being able to say what you need to say for yourself, but also communicating in a way that other people are impacted positively by your communication. Communication isn't just about you saying what you need to say for you without any regard to other people, but it's about being conscious and aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, but then also communicating with other people in a way that leaves them feeling touched, moved, and inspired, not disempowered, frustrated, etc. Now, you're not responsible for other people's emotions and how other people take your communication, but you can be cause in the matter, meaning that you can even communicate something that's difficult with somebody without it turning into a confrontation. So again, I have courses around communication, and communication is such a big topic, as well as boundaries. Dating is also another habit there, believe it or not. There's a lot of communication and boundary setting in the dating process, especially in this day and age. Our home life, so that looks like your chores and how you keep your home. If you have a lot of things everywhere, your mental and emotional health is going to suffer if you're not organized and picked up and that kind of thing. Parenting, because your children, are part of your environment. And so how you communicate with them and how you work with them and how you parent them. And then also too, how you relate with your parents as well. So whether you take full responsibility for how you perceive them, whether you accept them, forgive them for who they are, not who you want them to be. There's all kinds of nuances when it comes to our parents. And work life, right? So even working with bosses, working with managers, working with people that work for you, even the workload and work environments, there's lots of different nuances that can be broken down within that. And then education, how you continue to expand yourself personally, consciously, either as personal growth and self-development, or advancing yourself in technical or career items. So those are the things that fall within under environmental habits. Those are really big topics, but we tend to break them down and teach people how to develop healthy habits around there, especially if they're stuck in these different areas of your life. So just to give you some ideas in terms of, okay, what areas do I really need to continue to work on in my life? And I really recommend, as we go through these lists, just to kind of spark some of your interest, and we'll talk about it afterwards, is picking one or two areas. Don't try to overwhelm yourself with like everything, because some of these areas inadvertently will help heal up themselves. Like, for instance, if you work on your communication, that could help in many areas, such as your relationships, your parenting, and your work life. So, those kinds of things. Mental habits, that looks at your mindset, right? What you're telling yourself, what you're thinking about on a consistent basis, also how you're speaking and communicating, because when you communicate, you're putting an order out to the universe. Meditation. So meditation's different from prayer. Prayer is when you speak to higher source, creator, God, whatever you want to call that entity. And meditation is when you allow God, angels, universe, whomever, to speak to you. So meditation is even though they talk about meditation as silencing the mind, meditation is not always that. It's really about just being present with yourself in the moment. There's all different types of meditation, from walking meditation to breath work, which I put that on there as well. And so that's connection and embodiment with your physical body and your breath. Reframing, that's shifting, like emotional freedom technique is really good for this, where you shift from, let's say, a negative mindset to a positive one by unpacking all the emotions that have been stored around that thought process. And then manifestation does also tie into that as well. So meaning creating the life that you want, creating what you want in your life, that all goes into mental habits. Emotional habits look at emotional intelligence. That's healing all of the old wounds that you have from the past through previous relationships, such as betrayals, angers, frustrations, etc., old wounds, and processing those. Because if you have unprocessed emotions, a lot of times you're going to react, either you'll project or be passive aggressive, or your behavior will be reflected by those unprocessed emotions. I love the book by Dr. Carol Trueman, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And it really talks about those unprocessed emotions and what happens to them. There's also a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And so when we suppress those emotions and we don't process through them and we internalize them, they can create and build into disease in the body, dis-ease, right? Being aware of your emotions is an emotional habit. So if you have been taught to shut down your emotions, or it's not been safe to feel your emotions, you will have to develop a better habit of becoming more self-aware of how you're feeling and also how you're thinking. And there's two distinctions. You have thoughts and then you have feelings. And so as you become more aware of how you're feeling, then you'll be able to process through them and then eventually shift them into something that's healthier. And as you're building more conscious awareness of yourself in the world, you're also more consciously aware of how you impact the world and how other people impact you. And it helps you with boundaries even further. Spiritual habits are like spiritual practices, reading spiritual texts. We talked about prayer, devotionals. Those are books that, are like daily devotionals. They have daily scriptures and things like that. Going to spiritual groups like, church or synagogue, or different temples, things like that. Anywhere that you gather as a group. Spiritual classes as well. There's a lot of them around town. I know there's some like the Oneness, that's like a group meditation, things like that. Plant medicines as well have kind of been making a resurgence back again. So working with a shaman and utilizing plant medicines for spiritual clarity. Energy work, such as Reiki, that kind of thing, are also spiritual habits as well. You can learn how to do these things on yourself, and you don't necessarily need a group setting, but these are all habits that help you in the area of your spiritual health and well-being. And then lastly is our ancestral. So we look at, like I said, lifestyle habits that have been passed down. We recognize patterns that have been passed down, things that we may want to change, but also things that we want to keep going, right? So again, my parents as Marines, very structured, somewhat, my father far more organized than my mother, but that was a pattern I wanted to break from my mother's side and wanted to carry on from my father's side. And so structure, discipline, work ethic, those were all patterns that I wanted to continue to move forward. And then breaking different cycles in families. There's a lot of mental health on my mother's side, and wanting to break those patterns so that also too my daughter was not impacted by those as well. There's a few modalities that I just wanted to bring to light with this. Family constellation is one of them to help kind of heal those ancestral wounds, and then clinical hypnotherapy, and I'm trained in both of those too. So those are some of those other habits that can help really with any of those ancestral wounds. So I'm going to go back to consciously how to structure the habits, and then I'm going to open up for you guys to speak and ask any questions you have regarding perhaps an area that you want to work on for building a greater habit, or how to create a habit, or any of your questions or comments regarding a habit.
You sure cover a lot. I gotta say that. You definitely speak with confidence.
I
I
do.
was thinking you're sharp, and then I chuckled because you're steel.
I am, man. I like to cover a lot so that you understand the subject matter. I am a teacher, I'm a professor, so you got to get it from a professor perspective. So
You're good. Too many questions. I don't remember none of them.
So maybe a habit would be to work on your memory.
Well, actually, hon, I'm coming back from oxygen and paralyzed, and I realized I knew nothing. So basically, I'm relearning how to eat, drink, breathe, move, sleep, and actually be aware, at least while I do those things.
Yes, exactly.
So I went all the while out foraging, urban gardening. I don't need the stores. I drove my own well. I don't need the city water. This coming season will be take care of my electricity. And then my little 20,000 square feet, I'm good.
Nice.
The universe gives me everything I need right here.
Yes.
Out there in my mud bath or by the campfire, hanging in the RV. I'll have to take the boat someplace else to hit the river. That's almost a quarter of a mile away.
Yes. Yeah, but it sounds amazing nonetheless.
Life is amazing. Like I say, you've got it covered.
Yeah.
You know, I don't understand. Well, I understand I'm joyful and peaceful. I
Yeah.
don't know how. I have no idea how to lead anybody else there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's not, and oftentimes we feel almost responsible for other people, right? And it's not our responsibility to lead other people. We lead other people through example, right? So
Like
if
you say, I
I'm,
know I control three things: this mind, this body, and this being.
yes,
That's
exactly.
all I control. The rest of it says, "Boy, I don't like it. Glad it ain't my problem."
Exactly. And then even still, as I'm seeing more in, like, people are getting into health coaching or life coaching or different helping professions, right? That don't have as extensive of education or training, right? We see too a lot of people trying to force other people or tell other people what they need to do, and in a
Right.
clinical container. And then too, there's a lot of, now psychology has gotten a lot bigger, and so people throw around a lot of terms like narcissist and gaslighting and la la la, right? And while those terms in a psychological setting are important to be able to identify certain behaviors, right, it really doesn't help when you're in a relationship to throw those things out there, right? Or try to force other people to see it your way, right? And so,
Probably,
you
probably
know,
why I'm so happy I don't have to worry about the relationship. I enjoy being alone.
well, and that is by choice for sure. But we can't live as an island, right? We still have to interact with other humans at a certain point, right? And just as you're interacting with humans now, right? And so as we learn ourselves more and we work on these different concepts in our own lives, then our relationships shift, then our communication shifts with other people. We're not trying to fix or coerce or manipulate other people. We begin to accept ourselves unconditionally, and then we accept other people unconditionally. And it doesn't mean that we're not setting healthy boundaries with ourselves, because of course we want to set healthy boundaries, but then we learn how to communicate those boundaries in a way that is empowering to us and other people. So it's a process for sure. So any questions? Yeah.
Dr. Steele,
Go ahead.
I really appreciate you bringing the information together. A lot of times when I attend, workshops, different fields sort of connect to one another. And I think what was nice is your educational background, you make the connections. Yeah. I don't often see that. So that was very, very, I don't want to say assuring, but actually very comforting for me to see that, because there is an interconnection, mind, body, soul, and, so to actually have someone of your caliber put it all together, it's really refreshing to see.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why, I call myself a holistic doctor, because, and a lot of naturopaths, such as myself, they focus on the physical, right? And a little bit of the mind body stuff, but not really. They still leave that to a psychologist, or they'll, or the psychologist will leave the physical things, to the medical doctor. And we're so segmented at this point now in healthcare. We've got, this person going to that person, and this going to that person, this going, and nobody talks to each other, which makes it challenging. But when I'm sitting in front of a patient in front of me, and we're talking about, let's say, their eating, right? And we're talking about their habits. We're talking about their time management because they're overwhelmed, because they're a single mom and they're doing 3 things all at once, and they don't know, they really don't have all the structures in place. So I really had to learn how to break things down, where it's like, okay, first we have to get your your time management down, right? Then once we get that down, then we can put we can add some healthier habits in for your eating. And then we also have to work on your self-care, because if your self-care is not there, you can't be there for your kids, and so on and so on and so forth. So I think leaving out of kind of the microwave society sometimes that we live in, it's like, I want to go in to see somebody and I just want them to fix it, right? My job is not to fix it, but I want them to, somebody wants to come in and they're like, okay, I have all this problem and I need you to tell me what to do. And it's like, okay, well, this is a process and this is going to take some time. And it started to become obvious to me that there was a lot more to humans, which is why I say I treat humans, all day long. And as I'm treating humans and working with humans, I'm seeing all the different aspects, because one thing will impact another, which will impact another, which will impact another. And it just snowballs into a bit of a mess. And me being objective and seeing everything, I'm able to organize and categorize it so that people are able to now follow a process, and it be more organized. So it's not overwhelming, because if people are already overwhelmed, you can't add one more thing for them to be overwhelmed about. That's just not responsible or healthy.
That's exactly right. I agree. And I think it's very difficult sometimes for people when they're told to focus on one thing, but there's another aspect from a different area
Yeah.
that they really need to work on in order to get that other area in check.
Yeah, and they get and you can see it when they continue to fail, and they're not achieving their goals, and then they go into this mental state of, I'm wrong, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, and it just continues to reinforce that helplessness, hopelessness, victimization, which then keeps them further stuck. And so that's why really it's important to look at all aspects of the human being to be able to determine, because it may not be a food issue. It may not even be a mental issue. It could be as simple, like I said, as a time management issue, as a subconscious mind issue, as a habit issue. It could be all kinds of things. Most of the time people come in and it's just a symptom of some of these underlying issues. And I think too, the difference between myself and, let's say, other providers is I actually live my life like this. So there's the educational piece of it, but there's the practical application of it too. So in the practical application of it is very nuanced, and there's a lot to unpack just in practicing these things every single day. Like, for instance, I'm fortunate enough and grateful that when they closed the gyms, I said, okay, well, I'm going to bring a gym into my house, because working out is something that's really important to me. And bonus, I get to save time now, because I don't have to go, and money, because I don't have to go travel, because I live at the ocean front. So the closest gym, One Life, is about 15 minutes away. So I gain 30 minutes of time every single day back, and then also 2 gym memberships and things like that, right? So, but if I wasn't aware and present of how I could incorporate those things and then put those things in place, it wouldn't have happened, right? So a lot of times people can't see for themselves how to implement certain things. They just get stuck and shut down and upset and frustrated and don't move forward, and don't go to the gym forever because they're closed,
I got a trick for you for the water.
Oh, yeah.
See, I decided I wanted to cut off on the coffee, so I went to infused waters. Well, like this mornings, I put a little effort into it. I zest a lemon and squeeze the lemon, and I put hot water and do the rind separate. I do the ginger separate. I do the zest separate, and combine it all. That's quite a bit of work. But the real easy one, I buy these bags of mixed berries. I just thought enough out to, well, I use an old deli container kind of size thing you do, and I make 2 of those, and I'm good for the day for my drink. You just squish up the berries a little bit, add hot water, throw a little honey.
Love it.
Oh man, you love your water. You'll be thinking you'll be having a slushy all day that you get. But the nice thing is, see, today I had the blueberries, so you get a snack at the bottom.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So one of the other participants had communicated in the chat, so I'm gonna read the chat that she had expressed. So how do you deal with fear is her question. And so her question is relative to anxiety and feeling that in her body, right? And so so fear is a determiner, right? Meaning that we have 2 motivations in our subconscious, right? Love or fear, right? So fear, right? When fear gets triggered, right? It can trigger fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. So flight is where I'm going to run away and I'm going to avoid, right? Freeze is I'm going to shut down and I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to procrastinate, right? And fight is either I'm going to fight myself, like in the form of depression, or I'm going to fight other people, right? Verbally or otherwise, right? And so when we experience fear, it's just telling us that we're reaching our edge, right? So fear is a great tool to be able to for us to be able to journal and see what we're afraid of, right? So a quick exercise with this is when we experience the emotion fear, we're going to go back to what thoughts we're telling ourselves, right? So so let's say the fear is around I'll use the context of dating because I'm dating, right? So I've had some pretty not so great relationships in the past. I've had some great ones, but none that have really stuck for a long period of time, right? And so, I could, going out and dating, right, does elicit a form of anxiety and fear, right? So I sit with the fear and I observe it. Okay. So what am I afraid of? So I journal that out. Well, I'm afraid of getting hurt. I'm afraid of, being betrayed. I'm afraid of being cheated on. I'm afraid of, opening up to somebody else and being vulnerable to them. I'm afraid of, so I just write down all of the lists of things that I'm afraid of, right? And then I ask myself, is this true, right? And so is it true that I could be hurt? Yes, right? Is it true that I could be vulnerable? Yeah, that I have to be vulnerable? Yes. Is it true? So I write down true. Now I ask myself, do I want this to be true? Okay. So so yes, sometimes it can be true, but do I want this to be true? Yes or no? Because I have a choice in the matter, right? So let's say I go, I don't want this to be true. So if I don't want this to be true, right? What do I want to be true instead, right? So what I want to be true instead is that I'm comfortable in my own decision making and I trust myself enough that I'm open to the experience of just meeting people, right? So I'm going to release and let go of the outcome, right? And I'm just going to enjoy the process of getting to know people, right? And I trust myself and I trust my boundaries and I trust my decision making enough that if I don't feel like this is a good fit, I'm going to communicate that. Right? I'm not going to betray myself and put myself in a situation where I don't feel comfortable. So with that, I take the pressure off of it. So as we call it kind of chunking down, right? So we start off with the fear at top and then we chunk down, right? To a place where in our mind, we can reframe that fear into love. So I'm loving myself. I'm not rushing. I'm not anxious about it. I'm actually having fun getting to know myself and getting to know other people, right? And so, we have to release the outcome, right? That you're trying to achieve. Because when you try to put the outcome on top of it, so like losing weight, et cetera, you put too much into it, right? And so if you just get to what you're afraid of, right? And why you're afraid, and then reframe that out, that can give you more power and freedom. It's not that you're not going to be afraid, right? Anytime you do something new, you're always going to bump up into fear, right? But if you can shift that fear from that from a paralyzing state into an empowering state, then you'll have more movement. So hopefully that helps. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. But fear is very much a part of life. When I was younger, I'm still pretty young. I watched, there's this movie by Al Brooks. He actually directed it and starred in it. And it was called Defending Your Life. It was a great movie. It was done in the 80s. And I watched it as a kid. And so what happened is that, the film opened and he was an insurance salesman, and it was his birthday, and he bought this new BMW. At the time, it was like the BMW, like 325, like the old school 1985 ones that were really popular at the time. And so he, bought this car and was driving around, and, had his tape in the player, whatever. And then all of a sudden gets hit by a bus, right? And then he dies, and he's kind of going back into almost like this purgatory state, right? And so the premise of the movie, he gets given an attorney, right? And there's a prosecuting attorney and there's a judge, and you have to defend your life. You have to defend the choices that you've made and the things that you've done, et cetera. And it's a love movie. So also Meryl Streep is the love interest, and she's in the same kind of situation. So her court case is like, she's like running into buildings with, rescuing animals, and, he's over here deliberating over, making business decisions and so the premise of the movie was, did you live your life out of fear or love? Okay. And that was the premise of if they moved on to, heaven, or if they came back to earth and, did it all again. Right. And so if we ask ourselves in any given situation, are we living in fear or are we living in love? Because fear is an illusion, right? What do they say? False evidence appearing real, right? And so if you can start to put a pen and a paper and reframe that out, then it won't have any power over you, and you'll realize that it's just self-created. So now that doesn't, that's one piece of it, right? The mental and emotional side of it. Now, if there's a physiological side of it, meaning that if you have epinephrine, norepinephrine, if you have dopamine, serotonin issues, chemical in your brain, if you have, if you're not eating enough protein, right, and you're going amino acid deficient, that can trigger anxiety as well if you go into a hypoglycemic state. So there are some physiological things that can also be driving anxiety that can then drive fear. So it's important too that if it's something persistent, you may want to seek a healthcare professional. All right.
Well, another thank you.
Yeah.
Because I never really looked at journaling that way. Well, and so I do that all the time. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I don't go into the complete steps, but I'm always writing out whatever I'm kind of catching in my head. It's like trying to make sense of the little pieces,
Yes.
But that's journaling. My prior perception was write down what the hell you did for the day.
Yes.
It's like, well, that makes more sense to journal what I felt through the day. What we do is kind of irrelevant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the actions are one thing, but your thoughts and your feelings around it are totally
different. I never thought about that. Thank you so much.
Yes,
like I said, journaling was just more or less a dictation of what the hell I did during the day. Yes. I'm like,
yeah. So we bring it into the feeling, and then also too, right? Do we want these feelings? Yes or no? Are they true? Yes or no? Because remember, feelings are just, they are just created. They're like clouds floating by in the sky. We choose to give them power. And so sometimes emotions can be really big, especially if we haven't been taught how to self-regulate, right? So what I mean by that is, so my mother suffered from mental illness and was not a good self-regulator. She could go from 0 to 60, 0 to pissed off in 2.5 seconds, right? And so what I learned as a child was to be non-self-regulating, but then also too, because they were Marines as well, it was also so I get the 0 to 60, but then I also get the shut it down. Emotions are not, you're not supposed to feel those, right?
Confusing.
So very confusing messaging for a child, right? So, just let them all hang out, but they don't exist, right? So, I grew up going, oh my gosh, I just need to and I'm very sensitive as a human being. I'm very empathetic. And so, I had to really learn how to be self-aware, that it was safe to feel my emotions, and then knowing what to do with them, and not, vomiting them up over everybody that I come in contact with, or projecting them onto people, or shoving them down and being passive aggressive, or being afraid to express what I want or think as a fear of what other people will say or do as a response. So, there's a lot of nuances to these things. That's why it's like, these are really broad strokes, right, that I'm giving you, but understand that in any area of your life, you want to restructure it. This is a process in a container that you can follow.
Yeah, I guess what hit me the most too is because I had figured out just recently, like the last couple of years, is like, okay, Craig, you can't stop shit, but you can start new, better shit.
Yes, exactly. You definitely can create new, always. What has happened, and we can forgive it, and we can let it go and release it, and then we can build on top of it. And sometimes if we try to build on top of it, if we haven't truly dealt with the past, then it can start to creep up on us. And that's where the observation comes so in handy. It's when you begin to observe yourself instead of judge. We're so hard on ourselves. If we can just observe and say, you know what, I'm doing the very best I can with what I have at the moment, and I'm going to be a gentle observer. I'm going to almost be like a scientist, right? So part of my dating, right, I always say, oh, this is part of my research, because I'm learning about other people. I'm learning about men. I'm learning about how they interact. I'm learning what I like, what I don't like. I'm learning, what kind of man I want to be with, what kind of man I don't want to be with. I'm learning through the entire process, rather than going, oh my gosh, I'm still single. Oh my God, that whole thing, because that's only going to create more of the same. So,
like you say, I'd kind of simplified it for myself as like, well, wait a minute. I'm uncomfortable. What is the lesson in this discomfort?
yes, exactly.
You're right, the comfort, but it's not that I'm uncomfortable. It's just there's a lesson available.
Yes, there is. Exactly. Yeah, I would say get comfortable with the discomfort.
Well, I try to live as comfortably uncomfortable, because I know I've got to push myself, but I can push myself over the edge.
Yes, exactly. It's a process for sure. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments or anything?
Well, just one more. You're amazing.
Thank you so much.
Do we get to look at this stuff somewhere?
Yes.
I'm not too
So I just really quick, if anybody ever needs any help, you can contact our office. And then we do have an online course, 30 Days to New Habits. I will be packaging this webinar, so that's why I'm recording it. And so I'll be sending it out to you guys with a little email listing, so it kind of keeps you in the process of building healthy habits. So just give me a couple days to get that out to you guys, so you'll have a copy of the webinar that we've recorded, so you can go back and listen to it, and then also you'll have an email series with it as well to help implement new healthy habits for you guys.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yes, awesome.
I ended up here.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions or comments or anything? All right, well, enjoy your Saturday. It has been a pleasure getting to know you guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.
The
Enjoy
same here. Take care now.
Thank you too. Bye.
Bye.